So I'm going to talk about iron and carbon. Iron is a chapter about his friend Sandro. They were chemists together, and Primo and Sandro shared a table at the lab. Primo was cerebral, kind of a wimp, awkward with girls, someone unhappy in love or unfortunate in love, always trying to say the right thing and not being able to do it, thinking all the time, thinking about writing, thinking about thinking. Sandro was adventurous. He was a physical guy. He was a guy's guy. He loved to go hiking. He couldn't stand the theoretical side of chemistry. He was all about putting the chemicals together and seeing what kind of reaction they would have. Sandro kept saying, Primo, come on, let's go hiking. Stop with the thinking. Let's do stuff. And it was Sandro who introduced in young Primo Levi's life, the life of the student Primo, the idea that doing things was going to be more effective, was going to stave off this oncoming chaos much better than thinking and writing. And Primo envied Sandro his ability to be iron-like. The chapter's called Iron. It's partly about what they produce in the lab, but also it's about Sandro, the Iron Man. And like an Iron Man, he would climb mountains on weekends with Primo huffing and puffing behind. Primo, come on, we got to get up to this ridge. Oh, no, it looks like it's snowing. It looks like it's 30 degrees. I guess we'll just have to camp out here. Primo, I can't do that. Well, we can do it. And Sandro insisted that Primo achieve some kind of toughness that Primo knew he was not capable of. And it was Sandro who kind of teased Primo into joining the partisans. And Sandro who convinced Primo that he could hold a gun, which he could barely do. And I don't think Primo ever loaded that gun, actually. And he mostly carried it on his side. He never shot it. It was Sandro who suggested that it was possible that Jews who went to the university could be ready to fight, that they could be ready to resist the Italian fascists and maybe even the German fascists as Iron Men. Sandro represented the physical being. Primo represented the thinker and the writer. And at the end of the chapter where we pick up, they've gone on one of their weekend hikes. And Primo's once again wishing and envious, wishing he could be physical and envious of Sandro's ability to be a body, to be a Jewish body, to be a Jewish strongman, a kind of Maccabee. We just won't do it, says Sandro. We'll just stand here and they'll have to knock us over. And Primo knew he couldn't do that. Primo knew that if he would ever survive this thing, it wouldn't be because of his physical strength. It would be because of something else. Ironically, it's through Sandro that he discovers that he needs to think and write. And so, this is the last sentence of the third from the end paragraph. I'm reading at the end of the paragraph that begins, "But we went back down to the valley." And he says, after talking about this hard hiking, "That is why I am grateful to Sandro for having led me consciously into trouble on that trip and other undertakings which were only apparently foolish. And I am certain that they helped me later on." And of course, they helped him later on because he needed to establish a certain amount of toughness at Auschwitz. And then he continues to tell us what happened to Sandro. They didn't help Sandro, or not for long. And then finally we find out who Sandro was. Sandro was Sandro del Mastro, the first man to be killed fighting in the resistance with the Action Party's Piedmontese military command. After a few months of extreme tension, in April of 1944, he was captured by the fascists, did not surrender, Iron Man-like, and tried to escape from the fascist party house in Cuneo. He was killed with a Tommy gun burst in the back of the neck by a monstrous child executioner, one of those wretched murderers of 15 years old who Mussolini's Republic of Salo recruited in the reformatories. His body was abandoned in the road for a long time because the fascists had forbidden the population to bury him. An unburyable dead Jew. This was such a violation of Primo's sensibility. And so Primo is left trying to figure out what Sandro means to him and to us. And so he pauses and you get a break, and then he says, to conclude the chapter called Iron, which takes place before we get to Auschwitz in this book, before the middle of the book, which is about Auschwitz. Today, I know that it is a hopeless task to try to dress a man in words, make him live again on the printed page, especially a man like Sandro. He was not the sort of person you can tell stories about, nor to whom one erects monuments. He who laughed at all monuments, he lived completely in his deeds. And when they were over, nothing of him remains. Nothing but words precisely. Which means that this is Sandro. That the recognition by Primo Levi that Sandro's deeds would come to nothing, that Sandro stood momentarily for resistance, the first to die in Italy, resisting, is gone, except for Primo now, who creates this thing you read, in which Sandro only exists. So deeds are great, and Sandro's modeling of deed-doing made it possible, barely, for Primo to survive Auschwitz. But that's not enough. It was necessary to have enough of Sandro's Ironmanishness to survive Auschwitz. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient. What had to come to him was the idea of bearing witness to Sandro in words, and to doing the wimpy, thinking, cerebral, writerly thing. And it was that enabled him to remember Sandro, and for us to know that Sandro existed.